we are back. The weekly show is back. And guess what? I'm in a car again, Jimmy. I'm in a car again. I don't even know what to tell you. So I'm driving from Missouri to Wisconsin, and then I pulled over and I found a spot. I tried to find a spot where there's not going to be a lot of people coming back and forth so I don't have to drive out. But here I am again. What's the spot that I picked? A spot in the parking lot right next to a park. I don't know why I do this to myself. There's no chance that I can go for 40 minutes without people coming in. And then there's just some creepy guy with a Wisconsin plate just sitting at a park waiting for whatever. That's not going to go well. That's not going to go well, Jimmy. So I may just need to move out. So now I'm sitting in the front seat. So after 3 days of work and school's got a chance, woke up early, celebrate a great opportunity over the course of the last couple of days. And here we are, started driving, and I needed a break. So I thought, let's just jump on a weekly show. Oh, of course. Of course. Now the sun pops out right there. Of course it does, son. Of course it does. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes and now it pops up. Please. Well, anyway.
Joe, you know what I'm thinking? It's like, first of all, you gotta glow to you this morning. I'll say that. And
I know, do it again.
Just came out of nowhere. But you know what I almost feel like? It's almost like Baruti came on today knowing that, Baruti's such a fan that he brought glitter today. And it's like
you better stop
it. Glitter today, Joe. That's what he did. He sprinkled glitter. Baruti, what's your thoughts on glitter? Do you like glitter?
Thing in the world.
Not like glitter?
When I saw the question the young man asked, I didn't even know he was talking about. I don't think I've ever thought about glitter before.
You know what, Baruti? Then you win because you shouldn't have to think about it. It's the dumbest thing in the world. It's the dumbest thing in the world. It gets everywhere. There's no reason people should use it. And sand is actually nature's glitter, and that gets everywhere too. So I'm out on sand too.
Oh, Joe.
You go. Jimmy, I got to move the car. I'm so sorry. I got to move the car. You started out. I got to move the car. My God. How is this a thing? Every week, Jimmy.
Joe,
week.
what are those red and blue lights on behind you?
That's stop. I don't need this from you. I got it. This is ridiculous, Jimmy. Absolutely ridiculous. All
right. You move the car. I'll talk to Baruti, and we'll let Baruti get us started here. So,
all right,
good morning, everyone. Welcome to the weekly show. We are super jazzed this morning, and the reason is, has nothing to do with Joe parked next to a park. It's all about Mr. Baruti Kafele. Baruti, we are so excited to have you on here today, my friend. I know you're super, super busy. I know you got your own show coming up at 10:55 Eastern Time.
That's right.
Guys, if you have not checked out Baruti's show, the AP and U Principals Academy, this guy's been doing this, I don't know, Baruti, what is it, 4 years now, maybe? 4 years plus?
4 years.
200 shows?
202 Saturdays.
Yeah. And not only that, here's what's more impressive. It's one thing, he's not like us. The weekly show's like, well, sometimes it's bi-weekly, sometimes it's tri-weekly. Baruti Kafele is really, truly the weekly. Every week, count on Baruti at 10:55. So if you haven't checked it out, you don't have to register, you don't have to sign up. You just jump on. You just jump on Facebook and join Baruti. So we're going to encourage you to do that. In addition to that, this guy here, this is what I was thinking about this, Baruti. Because here's what I really respect about this guy. Okay, so first of all, he's written, I think, 13, 14 books, okay? And obviously, here's the bigger deal to me. So of the 13 books, he legitimately has 7 ASCD bestsellers. Now, let's just talk about that just for a second.
Yeah.
I have 3 on those standards. I've never written a book for ASC, but I know their standards. And I believe their standards is 10,000 sales in the first 6 months to be considered a best author.
Yeah.
That is impressive. Because here's the thing. Everybody now has, best-selling author. I'm going to call BS. I want to see the numbers. I don't think it's true. By what standards are we doing? And the standard is the gold standard. So I know Baruti Kafele is the gold standard because it is ASCD standards. And that, my friends, is legitimate. So not only does he have that, 35 years, I believe, of public speaking, over 3,000 events all over the place. Is my school a better school because I lead it? I just love that title. Every time I see that, I get jacked up. But it's the I'm going to call it the 50 book for a second, because it's about the 50 central questions and meaningful leadership and professional growth. But you've got the assistant principal 50, the aspiring principal 50, the Aspiring Principal 50, the Principal 50, the Teacher 50, the Equity and Social Justice 50. I love it. So I love the brand. And now your latest book, Closing the Attitude. Oh, excuse me. No, the Assistant Principal Identity.
Yeah.
I forgot about the Closing the Attitude Gap, because I feel like that's your term. That's what you coined, the attitude gap. But the new book, Assistant Principal Identity, is just hot off the press. And I think it's just a part of another series of books you're going to be doing. So we're super jazzed about that, my friend. But this guy has a list of accomplishments. We don't need to tell them all, but I'm super excited to talk to you about today, because we're going to be focusing on the assistant principal and how we can support the assistant principal to greatness, and why it's so challenging, and what are things that, when I say we can do, I'm talking about what can principals do, what can superintendents do, what can staff do, what can the community do, what can we do in this world to support the assistant principal, which is one of the most underrated, or I shouldn't say it's underrated. It's not knowledge. It's not supported. It is a complex position, and sometimes I don't think they get their due credit. So, Baruti, we're going to turn it over to you to give us your thoughts. Joe and I will jump in. We'll try to add a nugget every now and then, but I'm curious, so I got my notepad ready to go, my friend, and we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Good to see both of you early Saturday morning. I see you on my computer every Saturday, but now I'm in the space with you. You know, that assistant principalship. You know, you think about there are various points in our lives. This is away from the professional side, just points in our lives that we just can't let go of. You know, it could be something very special. It could be something traumatic. It could be whatever. But just certain things, certain aspects, certain experiences in our lives that we just can't let go. Well, on the professional side, the one thing, I guess there are two, but in the context of today's discussion, the one thing I can't let go is that assistant principal experience that I had. Here I was coming off of being named the teacher of the year for my school, my district, my county, and New Jersey State finalist. So I'm thinking in my mind that a lot of what I did in the classroom is going to be transferable. Not me being in the classroom as an AP teaching, but the skill set that I had. I'm thinking that's going to be transferable for me to help teachers to become that much more effective in their own classrooms. And I found out very quickly that that's not who I was going to be. So with all that I had, that I brought along with me, I became this full-time disciplinarian, and not because the students were unruly, but because there was a culture there that was so toxic that they had no other option but to be what they were at that time. So here I was, this guy, but I also was the inventory clerk. So I literally would order the teacher supplies and deliver them during instructional time, right, with a little black cart. Yeah, that was my full-time job. It's like I was some clerk coming around. And then, you know, the cafeteria duty for 2 periods, and then bus duty. And that kind of rounded out my day. And I just haven't let that go. It's you know, that was in 1998. And I still, it still bugs me to this day. So somewhere along my journey, I said, I need to focus on the AP. You know, we focus so much on the principal, including the literature that's out there, the books that are out there, everything. You know, the AP is going to grad school to learn how to be a principal. But what's in there to prepare that person to be AP, including the relationship with the principal, so that I can become that person I want to, that I really want to be. So I wrote a blog post. I think it was in 2018, the assistant principalship, the most misunderstood and underutilized position in all of education. I've written a zillion blog posts on my personal blog page, but nothing has ever gone viral. But this one did. And I said, okay, this is resonating with people. Let me turn this into a book. So I literally just took that essay and made it into the Assistant Principal 50. And that book is just been phenomenal ever since, you know. So that's where it is. There are other things that I address, you know, principal leadership, climate, culture, attitude, equity, social justice, all that kind of stuff. But at my core in this season that I'm in is the assistant principal. Yeah. That's got to change, starting from the superintendent in terms of how they see it, how they approach it, all the way to the assistant principal, him or herself.
So, Bruder, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Because I think the thing that resonates with me when you talk about it is when you said misunderstood. I completely agree with that, and almost like mismanaged, misunderstood. But I think it comes down to misunderstood. Why do you think that when it comes down to the assistant principal position, everybody is in such a different place with how they interact with the assistant principal, what the roles and responsibilities are of the assistant principal, and how do you, as someone who's not there every day, how do you help leaders put themselves in a situation where they can get the most out of the assistant principal while also making sure the assistant principal has the right tools to grow in their respective position?
Yeah, you know, the assistant, who that assistant principal is in the building is going to boil down to who that principal is
Yeah.
in that building. So I may be blessed to be appointed to a school where there's a principal that understands that that a significant portion of his or her role is to grow me,
Yeah.
to give me exposure, to allow me to grow, right? Whereas I may go to another school and this person was groomed the way that I'm going to now be groomed as this disciplinarian, right? And then you look at the national landscape, particularly in urban schools and in many rural, where it's just the tradition that the assistant principal is this roll up the sleeves, do the dirty work guy.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
that has become the national culture of the assistant principal. So it's like when I go to a district and my day is going to be with assistant principals, I always ask the client, is there any way possible that we can get at least some of the principals in this room? Because it's just like what I do on Saturday mornings. You know, you get APs fired up, they write me inboxes and all that throughout the course of a day. But the problem is they're going back to their school on Monday. And unless they have the audacity to engage the principal in a serious conversation about whatever it is we covered on Saturday or whatever they read in my book or your books, whatever it is that expands their role so that now I can be that person. And the reason I use the word audacity is because typically it's the culture that's compelling that AP to be that person. So we need to have a conversation as a team and ultimately as a school about the prevailing culture of this school so that we can begin to look at ways that it can shift so that now I can be freed up from doing discipline all day because I don't have students being sent to me all day because students are coming in compliant with expectation. And now I can be that person, that instructional leader, that instructional coach that I need to be. Because at the end of the day, you all know this, I'm preaching probably to everybody who's watching. If as an administrator, whether it be AP or principal, I cannot be that instructional leader, that instructional coach. Well, that's comparable to think about that football team, and I can say any sport. That's the first sport that came to my mind. Think about that football team where the head coach and all the assistant coaches say to the players, "Look here, guys, you go out there and play that game. We'll be somewhere in our offices somewhere, and if you need us, holler." Right? Just think about that. Because that's essentially what we're doing in the school. When we're not that instructional leader, that instructional coach, we're saying to the teachers, hey, folks, you go out there and teach your butts off, and if you need us, we're here, right? And then that's we're out of the picture. We got to be in the game, right? Like right there on the sidelines, coaching while the game is being played. And in so many cases, that's not happening. So then we scratch our heads. Why are we such a low achieving school? Why such behavioral issues and all the other questions that we typically ask? Well, the team's got to, you show me the team, any sport that's being coached at a high level, and I'll probably show you a team that's on its way to a championship.
Yeah. It's funny, Baruti, you said, and that is such a great point. And you guys, or Baruti, used the word misunderstood, right? And we hear this, that the role of the AP is misunderstood. I do think there's a correlation, though. In my experience, what I see is that the reason they're misunderstood is because I do believe we mismanage them. And so when we mismanage them, it's almost like we give them an identity that is, hey, you manage the discipline. That's what you do.
Yeah.
But then we don't prepare the assistant principal for the role of the principalship based on what you just said. And I agree with that, is how do we help that individual grow and develop to become an instructional leader. But I do worry, Baruti, is because sometimes the principal is also becoming the disciplinarian. And
Yeah.
so they're not modeling the things that they need to model to prepare the AP for that role. So if we believe that the instructional leader is almost primary, right? It's almost the most important thing. If you're looking at student achievement, if you're looking at graduation rates, if you're looking at overall success of a school, and we're truly preparing our students and providing higher orders of learning, then we have to be in classrooms to support that. And it's not only just us, but how do we cultivate a community where not just the principals are in the classroom, but how do we get other teachers in that classroom? So Baruti, one thing I'd ask you is to talk a little bit about, in your experience right now, and you're in buildings and working with principals, what do you say to principals to help prepare the AP for that role? What are some things that you remind them of that's very critical in order to prepare that AP for that next role?
Let me give a real life example. Here in Jersey, I've had several districts that recruited me, were very much interested in me becoming the superintendent, which I had zero interest in. That's just not something I want to do. But I went to each of the interviews, right? And I was getting ready to say something I don't need to say. So I went to each of the interviews, and just to get a sense of what they wanted to ask me, and a sense of what I wanted to say to them. So they asked me all these questions, and I would say to each of them, I said, if I were the superintendent in this district, I would have to be able to spend a portion of my day in the buildings, because as important as the children are, as important as the teachers are, from my viewpoint as superintendent, they are not my most important people. My most important people in the building are the principals, right? Because it's a huge organization, and each branch is being led by a leader. Well, I need to know that leadership is on point. So they asked me, so what would you do? I said, though that's my foot soldier. I got to be able to visit these schools and see that this school is being led according to my model, and my model would be heavy duty instructional leadership. So because see, I can't even talk about an assistant principal yet. I want to see who this principal is instructionally, in terms of how that person may utilize the AP, how that person may utilize the instructional coaches, teacher leaders, etc. So I got to see that, though. I can't just have a conversation at a monthly principals meeting at central office. I gotta be in the school, and I gotta see that, right? And then I gotta coach that. So they would say to me, well, you can do that. I say, yeah, you say that now.
Yeah, right.
But I wonder, when you hire me, will I still have that flexibility to spend those portions of time every day in different schools to ensure that the leadership is on point? So now, going back to the question, what types of things are we talking about? Well, primarily we're talking about what is the culture. There's culturized. What is the culture? What is the climate of this building, right? So here's myself and my team, and we're having this conversation. Like what is the experience? And this is key for me. What is the experience of walking through the front door? Now, someone on the outside, layperson, that might be that might be a trivial question. But someone that knows education knows that and the key word is experience. What is my experience of walking from outside the door through the threshold into the building? What is that? Right? Because see, and I'm talking to folks that understand this right now. You and I can morph a school's culture through the way a youngster walks in the building. Like, what is that experience? What if I, as the principal, matter? Like, what if kids see me and like, man, Kafele, I love Kafele. That's my guy, right? Well, what if you love me and I'm outside to greet you, I'm outside to hug you or embrace you, I'm outside to shake your hand and to tell you how glad I am to see you? Man, I'm shaping the building and I'm outside in the cold, right? That experience. But what if I'm working with a principal, and I discerned that principal doesn't matter. Like he's nobody to the kids, right? Then your presence doesn't mean anything. So I had to make sure that as a principal, my presence matters to my students, to my staff as well, but I'm focusing on the students here. And now in having that conversation, that's a little like just a smidgen of a conversation about the culture of that building. So that culture is going to begin with the experience of walking in the building. But then once I'm in there, what is that experience like we break this thing up into these small chunks. What is the experience of being in that building from the time I walked in until homeroom is over? I want to get that thing down to a science, man. What are you feeling when you're in that homeroom? What are you feeling when you're in that hall? So what if I have, or if we have breakfast, what are you feeling in that cafeteria? What if I've got situations in that school where I've got kids that make other kids' lives miserable, right? Well, that's on me.
Yeah.
I've got a school where the most difficult, challenging, toxic portion of my day is being in that building. And we know that there are kids, the worst time of the day is when I have to be in a school. And I'm not talking about the academics, I'm just talking about the dynamics of relationships. Or the worst time of my day is being in a particular classroom with a particular teacher, right? And we may take that for granted, not knowing that this kid is suffering. You know, there are little subtleties. Kids laughing about my the way I look, my hair, my nose, my clothes, my sneakers, whatever it is. And the adults don't realize what I'm dealing with because it's so subtle, and then I can't tell anybody because there's a no snitch policy. So in terms of the code, so now I got to suffer in silence, right? So I'm looking at all this stuff with a microscope so that as we break it down, that experience, and I'm just talking between walking in the building and homeroom, that's a healthy experience of being in that school. And then that's just a starting place. And then we're gonna break it down throughout the course of the day as it relates to the overall culture. We want to culturize that building, right?
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Now, Bertie, hold on.
Bertie,
you had me.
Joe. Here's before Joe speaks. Let me say this, Baruti. I know Joe well enough that he has thrown up twice in his mouth since you've been speaking.
A little bit.
And it happened twice, and it's both times when you said culturize.
But everything you said was right, except when you start making up words. And here's the thing. We all know that you walk into a building and you get an indication of what the culture of that building is literally when you walk in. And you make a great point for when the kids come in. And I think two things. One, I couldn't agree with you more. From a leadership lens, if it was the superintendent lens, we are in charge of taking care of the adults who are taking care of the kids. Like, that's it. But we also have to model what that looks like when it comes down to it. And if we're modeling something and that's not being followed by the people that we lead, now that's the conversation that we have to have. And you're talking about what's the experience for kids when they come in. And I totally agree with that. I would add, what's the experience for every adult when they walk in as well? Because 80% of the voting public don't have kids in school. So when 80% of the voting public don't have kids in school, 80% of the voting public are making a judgment about school based on what happened to them when they were in school. And so when they reflect back on what their experience was, like you're talking about from a kid perspective, they're going to have a recollection. But if they come into school now as a new parent, right, or just for a practice or for a game or whatever it is in your community, if they have a different feeling, now we can build some momentum for that school, which in turn builds momentum for the leader who's setting the tone for that school and for that district. I couldn't agree with you more. And because I think a lot of times what ends up happening is we say, we're going to fix the culture of the building. And then we just start talking about all these pie in the sky activities that we're going to be all about. We're going to be about this thing. What you just said is so on point. What's the experience when you walk in? Like that. Think about what that does. Because everybody walks into that school, right? So what's the experience? What are you doing to give yourself the best chance when they walk in? If they walk in at 8, if they walk in at 10, if they walk in at 2:30, if they walk in at 3 o'clock to pick up kids, whenever they walk in, what's the experience from the front office experience to the first hallway experience to in the classroom experience.
That's right.
And if you can break it down to that, now all of a sudden you put yourself in a situation where you can get momentum along the way. I think you nailed it.
See, like,
Baruti, one of the things, I'm not even sure you intended to do this, but what I took out of that, what I liked, there was a couple things. One of all, you started right away with the idea of the superintendent's role to the principal, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I started seeing these parallels, right? So you have the superintendent. What are you doing to prepare that assistant superintendent to take the superintendent's role someday?
Right.
Principals, what are you doing to prepare the assistant principal to take over that role? Teachers, what are you doing to prepare that student teacher to take over that classroom someday? There are parallels in the work that we do when we start to think systemically, because at the end of the day, we are all responsible for the culture and climate of that organization.
Yes. Yeah.
And we have to begin to see that. And I love the fact that you use the word experience, because it is about the experiences that we're creating as a principal that would want an assistant principal to someday want to be a principal. And this is one thing that I keep seeing. And it is frustrating when we as a profession forget that people are listening to us.
Yeah.
They're watching us. And Baruti, every Saturday morning, it must just frustrate you that you're busting your butt to inspire people to want to go on this role. And then here we are telling everybody, oh, you don't want to do this. It's a terrible
right?
job. We are killing our profession. We are killing our profession.
Yeah.
And we have to champion for that, because the profession, I say this all the time. I'm not going to use the same word because we're on YouTube. But and then Joe's going to throw up. But my daughter, who's a nurse, says, Dad, can you come to my hospital and culturize our doctors, because they're, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's a reminder again that people, every profession has its issues.
Right.
The grass isn't going to be greener somewhere else. If you want your grass to be green, then fertilize your own grass, right? You can make your culture better. But we have to start changing our conversations and be careful about the words that we're choosing. And if we're going to truly change the narrative, then we have to change it first, right? But that experience is about, to me, it comes because not only are we modeling, and that's what you were saying, that you would have to be in the building to model what it would look like, right? So you could show the people. But the one thing I also remember is it's not for me just modeling, but it's also telling why I'm doing what I'm doing to bring that clarity. And so it's because it's from the eyes of a teacher, right? You're a teacher still. That's why you do what you do. You're at the heart of a teacher. Every time I hear you speak, you always go back to, at some point in that talk, to when you were a classroom teacher, because you're still a teacher.
Yeah.
And that's how we see it.
See, my name means teacher, Baruti.
Yeah.
You know, and but you know, going back to that superintendent, there's I don't know when this happened, but it was probably right before the pandemic. A question popped into my head doing a session, and I always do self-reflective questions, and the question was, what is my value to the teachers that I supervise ... instructionally? And that question made the room go silent. It's because now, I use these mirrors, because now one has to look within oneself. And when superintendents are in the room, so I started using the question. Superintendents in the room, I'm asking the question, think about it. What is my value to the teachers that I supervise instructionally? But here you are the one that supervises. Either you or assistant superintendents, depending on the size of the district. Here you are the ones who supervise the principal, right? So with the principal asking themselves that question, what is my value to the teachers that I supervise instructionally? Where do you stand on that? Like what is your role in helping that principal to answer that question? So I said, man, the way people are responding to the question, which is they're responding silently, right? Nobody wants to touch it. I said, okay, let me turn this into a full workshop. So now it's about 12 hours of content, right? And I said, okay, I'm using this probably more than I am anything else these days. So I said, let me turn it into a manuscript. So by the end of May, it's a full-blown, completed manuscript, right? Because like you mentioned earlier, Jimmy, is my school a better school because I lead it? The question. Well, I think that this question is just as potent as it relates to anybody that's in an instructional role and administratively. What is my value? And I always tell people, I said, let's distinguish two questions within one. What is my value to the teachers that I supervise? Put the question mark there. And I said, that's not my question. Got no interest in it. What is my value to the teachers that I supervise, instructionally? And a whole lot of folks in this business are going to struggle with that. And I'm going to be transparent on this, including me as a principal.
Yeah.
I wasn't that guy every day. That's why
Right.
the question is, my school a better school because I lead it? Well, it depends on what day you ask me. And when I do the presentation, that's what I say. On Monday, yeah, I guess it was. Tuesday, nah. Somebody else could have come in here and done this job. I didn't do it effectively. But that was my mirror that made me put pressure on myself, because I had certain criteria as to why I was effective or why I wasn't. It wasn't the totality of leadership. It was my two criteria: instructional leadership and student engagement. What was it about my leadership that I was engaging with students throughout the course of the day when I could? What was about my leadership that contributed to the growth, professional growth and development of a teacher, right? Those are my two criteria. So if I'm looking at the mirror at the end of the day, figuratively speaking, and I'm saying, what teacher was impacted by my presence today? None of them. So this wasn't a good day. What youngster was impacted by my presence today? None of them. I had no conversation, no interaction. All I said was hello to kids in the hallway as I passed them. Not good enough. So now I got to go back to the lab, meaning my office, and I got to figure out what went wrong and what I need to do going into tomorrow to be the guy that I want to be.
Okay, so two things that hit me there. That's so on point. But two things hit me, and the first is when you try to. Oh, it's so good, because we try to be all things to all people, and then we get disappointed in ourselves for not being all things to all people, and then we put ourselves in a really difficult position because we're not all things to all people. So when we say is the building better instructionally and our students better from an engagement, whatever it is, and we can identify that, now we have a measure by which we can come back the next day and think about getting better. And again, here's where we get ourselves into trouble. We do one of two things when we get back into the office. You talk about getting back into the lab to do this. Okay. You go back into the lab, and two things happen to leaders all the time. I see it all the time. And the first is they start making excuses for why it happened the way that it happened. Right. Well, this was a bad day. I mean, all this stuff happened, and then all of a sudden this happened and this happened. Right. And then all of a sudden it doesn't feel like, it was somebody else's fault. Or they go on the other side of the extreme and say, I just must not, I stink at this. I'm awful. I didn't get anywhere. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. So now tomorrow I'm going to do all of it. Absolutely. And I'm going to make up for today. And then when it doesn't happen tomorrow because something happens that you couldn't control, all of a sudden you're like, my gosh, what am I even doing? Why am I even doing this job? So we have people on two sets of the extremes. So what I would suggest to people is to identify what are the two things that you bring every day that are going to make sure that your building is better. But two, and I don't think we do this enough, tell people what those two things are.
Yeah.
Because when you tell the group that you lead, this is who I am and what I believe, and you don't go into that whole mantra of, like Jimmy says, the words on the wall into a 9-page mission statement, right? Anybody can do that. But what do you do? What are the two things that you're about? Right. And you have your two things, and then and I would say to them, hey, please measure me on these two, because every day I'm coming back to these two. There are days where I'll do more than these two. There are days when I'll do less, but I'm coming back every day, because after we talked and you told me that this is what you need in a leader, and this is what I believe that leaders do, bam, these are the two things, right? So like, make your judgment based on that. But the leader in space has to be willing to not fall into a hole of excuses, or create that they're not valuable at all based on one day's experience. And we get ourselves into this emotional like roller coaster, and then we're not doing well for anybody, because now we're not consistent in how we respond. Now we're not consistent in how we react to certain situations. I mean, you nailed it on every level, Baruti.
I mean, I love what you said. In the bottom line to everything you said is the discipline. You're not going to beat yourself up so hard that you destroy yourself. You know,
Right.
it's just self accountability. You're holding yourself accountable. I want to be better every day. It's that Mamba mentality that I want to go in there and I just want to be better than I was yesterday. But I also make the distinction often between the words leader and leadership. Right. So I'm not going to always put it on me, the leader, but I'm going to look at what is it about my leadership that's able to get these things done. And sometimes that's going to be more than just me in terms of those two things that I said. You know, how am I utilizing my instructional coach, for example? Right. Because however that person's being utilized and whatever success that person's having in the classroom with teachers, that's a reflection of my leadership.
Right.
Right. So, you know, like I tell leaders all the time, and I'm sure you do the same. Here we are at the conference. Here we are at the in-service somewhere. Well, the true test of your leadership now is what's happening in those buildings, which none of you are in right now. Some of them, they're nervous, like, man, I got to get back to school. Why? That's what I say to them. Just like, why? Can't you leave? Can't you go away for a week? And your leadership is present, not the leader. You know, so that word leadership is so significant when we talk about who that school is over the long haul.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baruti, you're dropping. I'm just, now you got my head spinning. I'm just gonna not get anything else done today, Baruti. It's your fault. I'm going all the way back to. I just catch these little things you say, right, and I see them, right. Like I know what you're doing, right. I can see it, but when you said earlier, like, yeah, what impact did I have on a kid today? I walked down the hallway and I said hello to a few kids today, but what really did I, what really impact did I make? And we see this a lot, right? And yet we believe that we're doing these things, but we're doing really surface level things sometimes. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is because of the pacing of the job, the stress of the job, the truth of the matter is, we've said this 100 times, people literally are handing keys to people and saying, go do the job. And yet there's nobody coaching or teaching them. They're doing the very best they can. And I want to go back to something Andrew said, and I appreciate it because Andrew's, always here and he's dropping comments and everything. I like that, and I appreciate that. It's not that I don't disagree that there are other external factors that impact the work that we do every day that make it more challenging. But Baruti, I always go back to something you taught me a long time ago, and you probably don't even remember this, but you already brought it up here today. Look, if I really go back, when I first started, we asked, what are the challenges that we're facing every day? And it was like, well, we never have we don't have enough money to do what we need to do. Or the Department of Ed is always putting their fingers in, or the politics around us are creating these issues for us, or the parents are so difficult, they won't let us do. And the school board is, you tell me a year that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Remind me the year we had enough money to run our schools, Bertie. Well, I don't remember that year. I just don't remember that year, right? Mm-hmm. I know these things are challenging, and they're always going to be challenges to work. But at the end of the day, as you always say, what can you impact? You pick up that mirror and ask yourself, what are you going to do to be better? And what is within our sphere of influence, people? Correct. At the end of the day, what can I still control? Mm-hmm. Because I can always find a reason not to do my job. And I know these things are challenging, but this is what we signed up for. That's and right. We signed up for because we believe. That's right, Baruti. If you became a superintendent, you're not. These people in that room they're like, oh, you wouldn't want to be the superintendent because you'll never be in buildings. Really? Because that's how you define the role of the superintendent. Right. I'm going to redefine the role of the superintendent. That's what you're saying. Yeah. Right? But then if I'm going to do that, then you better let me do my job, or we're just playing a game here. Right? We're just playing a game here. That's right. And so anyway, Baruti, I'm going to let you have the last closing comments here. But before we do that, because I'm going to let that, and then I'll let Joe just wrap it up. But I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to be here today and for you engaging our audience. And I'm already, you got my head messing around again like you always do, which I appreciate about you. But thank you so much, my friend. But we just have to remember, like I'm hearing you say, Baruti, the reflective leader is an effective leader. That's one thing I'm taking away from you today.
There it is.
That's right.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you early morning Saturday, talking a little leadership. And, the folks out there, you want to stay connected to me, principalkafele.com, principalkafele.com. Everything is there.
Well, we're all going to do that. And I love talking to you. And now I'm on the road for 7 hours. And guess what? I'm going to be thinking about all that because there's so much impact that we can have, but at the same time, so many external factors come into play and almost like mess with our heads in terms of where we're at. And if we can continue to make sure that we're consistent with the experience, like Baruti just said, like consistent with the experience that the people coming into the building are having. And if we put that out there for people to know and understand that that's who we are, that's what we're about, then that's what we're going to be judged on when it comes down to our leadership moving forward. So continued success for everybody. Baruti, thank you so much for being with us today. Jimmy, it was always great to see you, even though, you know, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. But we're going to do it again next week, I think. Maybe. I don't know. We're not consistent like Baruti at 200 and whatever. That's phenomenal. Okay, I'm just going to say it. Like, that's ridiculous, and I love it, and I'm inspired by it. But I can't spend another – I can't go consistent weeks with just talking to Jimmy. Maybe if I did this show alone, I'd be in a different situation. But he just drives me nuts. So this is where I'm at, man. So thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Baruti, thank you for your time. Have a great day. Make sure you follow Baruti. Jump on that show, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
God bless you, everybody. Baruti, stick around for a second, my friend.